All right, let's check the audio on this one. All right, let's see. It's going to be working. All right. This is going to work. Check the audio on Instagram. All right, we are in business. All right, so today is Monday. Happy Monday, everybody. We're going to go through the third zip code of these 5 zip codes in Detroit that was provided to me as desirable areas in the city of Detroit for potential Section 8 investing. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through. So, on the last 2 lives that we've gone through, we went through 48221 and 48235. Today, we're going to go through 48219. And for those of you that are joining in for the first time and you want to look at the full screen version as we go through all the bunch of files, you can go to youtube.com/@Kent_HE TGK. Hey, man, good to meet you. I think that's a great strategy. Getting to Section 8 after college. I wish I got started that early. So let me know what type of help you need once you kind of get into it. But for now, if you like, man, just underwrite deals with me every single day. Let's just do it together. This is how we get better. This is how you figure out whether or not if a deal came across your table and slapped you across the face, would you recognize that as a deal? This is the fun part, but it's also the non-exciting part. So just remember, it's supposed to be hard, but this is supposed to be hard. And this is the hard part, to doing the boring stuff every single day in and day out. I'm falling in love with the process. So I love that Kobe Bryant quote where he's like, hey, fall in love with the process and it will not be a surprise if you are successful, because if you do all the things that you want to do, then that's how it's going to be. TJK, if you do want to look at some podcasts around Section 8, I had a really good one right here. This is with Stu Hicks. He runs a Section 8 placement company in Detroit. So some folks might have heard rumors about Detroit, and sometimes it might be a crime-ridden area, etc. But Detroit is a street-by-street type of market. If you want to be successful with Detroit, you got to have a team in place that can educate you or teach you how to look for problems, how to manage your properties, et cetera, et cetera. So Stu runs it. I also had Ashley Hamilton. She's also known as Detroit_investor on Instagram. She was on our affordable housing and real estate investing podcast. So you can find that on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. I would appreciate if you guys can leave a 5-star review. It doesn't cost you anything, but it would help us a lot with our affordable housing mission by getting us discovered, and so that we continue providing you all with great information. So that one's going to be really good podcast for you to check out, TGK. And also the one with Ashley Hamilton, you'll be able to find that right on the video section on youtube.com/@Kent_HE. Give the channel a subscribe if you can. And this is the one with Ashley right here on the far right side. And the one with Dr. Joe Azamoah is also really good. He was also one of the very, very popular podcast guests on the Bigger Pockets podcast. So those are going to be really good ones if you're just trying to get into Section 8 single family. But on our podcast, we bring on folks that are single family Section 8 investors all the way through ground up construction. So you get to learn a little bit from everything. We have also had tons of people ask us questions about nonprofits. So I had recently a guest come on that talked about nonprofits. So leave a question in the comments or DM me any questions that you might have for other investors so that I can incorporate your feedback into the types of questions that I ask other folks. All right. This podcast is meant to serve all of you guys and answer the questions that you guys care most about. It's not for me, even though I am really, really curious about this stuff. But I think after a year of asking all these questions, there's just so much more to learn. So, all right, let's get into today's deal underwriting. So today, 48219, you're going to be able to find that this is in a northwest area of Detroit. When I visited, I stayed in, where did I stay? I stayed in around like the Southfield area, where I visited and had a meetup in Royal Oak and the Ferndale area. Nice area, really lots of food areas and stuff like that. Not like dangerous or anything like that. And this is right here in downtown Detroit, just so you guys are aware of where we are with the zip code 48219. So I kind of just zoomed in really quick. I filtered on 4-bedroom apartments. Single family homes. And I found this property. It was the most expensive one. So I figured, hey, I'll take a quick look at it. Now, the first thing I want to do today is do a street view. And what I like to do is go through the front and back of the street that I'm potentially investing in, because I want to see what the conditions of the homes are. And I just want to drive up and down the street of. Oh, this is a good sign. So for those of you paying attention to this right now, when you see speed bumps in Detroit, and I didn't know this until I asked a local investor, she told me that folks that invest in apartment buildings, they put in speed bumps to help deter crime. Why? Because technically it's harder to get away from the cops when there's multiple speed bumps. I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. So I like that there's speed bumps in the street right behind us. Now, is that a general statement? Is that factual? I don't know, but it's something that I heard. And sometimes these are the little goat nuggets that you would have never realized until someone gave you that knowledge specifically. So boom, more speed bumps. All right. I love speed bumps because then it helps deter crime, according to them. I'm just going to take it as face value. But for the most part, this area, I can see why it's desirable. It's like pretty well maintained. There's not like a lot of trash around anywhere. And yeah, this seems like overall a pretty good street, pretty good neighborhood to be in. So that's the first thing I would do. Second thing I would do is check the crime score. Now, I go to tophap.com, tophap.com, and I have, let's see, you can go to the neighborhood section and you'll be able to get the crime score right from the neighborhood section. And you can see right here, this is on 110. National average is 100, so this is just slightly above national average. I have another home that's like 120 in Fairfield, Alabama. So 110 is actually not bad at all for the zip code. So it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable that I'm corroborating the zip codes I got from Stu, and then also corroborating with the crime score I'm seeing in this area, and then also corroborating with the street view that I'm seeing in this area, where it's kind of nice to see the speed bumps, to be quite honest with you. So I'm good with that. All right. Next thing we want to do is we want to go through and check the general condition of the property. Now, it looks like it's been recently remodeled. The bathroom looks great. This carpet, whatever, would I remove the carpet? Yeah, I would like to, but if it's just been recently renovated, I'm not really in the mood for that. I like that there's some bars right here for the windows, but you want to make sure that when you're doing your inspection for your housing quality checklist, that those windows that are being barred right now are not necessarily preventing like a child from exiting through the window, because you do need 2 egresses in every single room for it to be qualified as a bedroom in this property. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is grab the county. Let's see what county this is in. This is in Wayne County. Okay. Wayne County. So the next thing we want to do is we want to grab the FMR, which stands for fair market rents. For those of you joining on Instagram, just know that we're also live on YouTube at youtube.com/@ken_HG, so you can see the full screen version. All right, we're going to go to Michigan. We're going to go through this process every single day, and we'll click the Wayne County. Once you get here, you're going to get the fair market rents, the FMR, that's what it stands for, by zip code and by bedroom count. This is 48219. So we're going to go to 48219. And that's going to give you a FMR 1510 for 48219 and 1620 for a 4-bedroom. So let me write this down. So I'm going to write down a FMR for a 3-bed is 48219. And that's going to be 1510. And then I'm just doing this on my Excel file on the other page right now. And I'll show you guys how I input it. But I like to kind of document these numbers as I get them so that I don't get confused, nor do I forget it, because my partners, they're very familiar with my underwriting process. So when they look at these numbers, they already know what I did. Similar to you guys watching this right now, you guys are knowing what I'm doing right now. Then I go to affordablehousing.com. I go to affordablehousing.com and then go to the market rent estimator. And then I plug in the address to get the bedroom count. When I plug in 4 bedrooms, you can kind of see here. Let's do 3 and 4 just so you guys can see difference in numbers. I'm paying attention to the number on the far right, which means it says right here on where it says 1190, that's the average market rent for 25 units within a 0.29 mile radius. Let's put in the 4 bedroom. Now you can see how much the rents jump. It jumps from 1190 to 1472. So I'm going to write down these rents because I like to know how comparable this is to the zip, the city, and the county, which is kind of close actually, 1623. All right, that's good. So here's why I'm going to use 1472 as my rent assumption. Because when you use 1472 as a rent assumption, the housing authority typically will compare your rent to what the FMR is. Even though the ceiling rent, quote unquote, is 1620 right here for a 4 bedroom determined by HUD, the housing authority is not going to allow you to charge 1620 because they will say, hey, you can't charge more than the market rent for this property simply because they are voucher holders for the obvious reason. So this is why we have 1472 right here. And this is the market rent. And this is likely the rent that I'm going to use as my assumption. Could it be higher? Yeah. Could it be 1500? It's only $30 higher. Great. Could you justify that with, hey, it's a brand new renovated property, so this is why I got charged more. There's a finished basement in the bottom, so there's more recreational space, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever, however you want to do it, but you want to have someone with familiarity with the housing authority that can work through and make the case for a higher rent if that is the case. But for me, I'm going to be conservative. I'm going to underwrite using 1472 and see what numbers will allow me to make this deal work. All right, cool. Brandon, you asked about a 8.5% interest rate. That is using a DSCR loan. That's a debt service coverage ratio loan. Could you get lower? Yeah, but I think I've seen these rates go pretty high. And I know that the rent rates just recently moved back down in the last week or so. So by the time it closes, you never know. So I like to just be conservative because if I underwrite at a higher interest rate and it's still a deal, then it's a deal. So I understand that I'm very conservative when I underwrite. And that's okay. That's my style. I'm not saying the only way I underwrite is the way or the best way, nor is it even the way that you should do it. I think it just depends on your own investor appetite. So you can definitely do whichever way you would like and use whatever interest rates that you get quoted on, right? So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and I am going to share the Excel file with all of you now. Let me pull this one up. Boom. Okay. Let's plug in these numbers. All right. Let's see if I can zoom out a little bit so you guys can see some of these numbers a little bit better. All right. So I'm looking at a 149,900. Let me go zoom in this way. Take my camera off. All right. And then my rehab is I'm going to plug in. I'm going to assume there's some budget for painting, but it looks good for the most part because it's recently renovated. So this is just in case I need to do anything else. So I'm going to leave my termite at 0 because I'm assuming there's no termite issues. And I'm just going to put in 1173 square feet for rent. 1173. I'm going to zero everything out. Again, for those of you that want to copy the spreadsheet, just DM me on an Instagram at investwithkenhe with your email, and I can have my team send this to you. I've been very fortunate to be given this spreadsheet by the folks, and I've been able to modify it to meet the way I underwrite Section 8 rentals. All right. So we've got $6,000 of rehab as a reserve on this piece. I'm going to assume that this is a 25% down right now at 8.5% interest rate. And this is going to equals to just make sure that the loan balance is correct. It's the asking price minus down payment equals the loan. All right. So 8.5% interest rate using that deal. All right. I got a 12% property management, which is what I've been quoted, especially if you just have one property. It's very hard to have. It's very hard to have a good property manager at 8%, especially if you want to succeed in this area. I would pay the 4% premium. That's just my personal preference. You can probably shop around and see what you can get. So my property taxes I get right from the Redfin website and the payment calculator, and it says 129 was the property taxes, and then the homeowner insurance was $65. So I'm just going to do 65, and I'm going to add a premium of 30% onto it, assuming that it's going to be a little bit more expensive for investment property. So this results right now, assuming a 2.5% closing cost on this property, that let's go through this. Let's go through this together. What's my gross rent? So $1,472. Let's go through the scenarios. Right now, I'm going to cash flow, assuming this, I'm going to cash flow -3. So that's literally not -0.1%. So at 150, I'm just going to write 150,000 just to keep numbers easy, and 68,600 for rehab. This is assuming 25% down, 8.5% interest rate. All right. So that's not ideal for me. How much would I pay for this property, assuming everything else is constant, to achieve a 15% return? So I'm going to start lowering this number, and let's see what we get. Okay, boom, $85,000. That works. It was $85,000, and the rehab stayed the same at 25% down, 8.5% interest rate. Now my cash and cash return is 14.8, so that's a little bit closer to the 15% I'm looking for, and I will cash with $370 a month, assuming I make $1,472. Cool. All right. Well, what if I got a really, really high rent for this property? What if I got $1,600? What am I willing to pay for this property? Okay, if I got $1,600, now I'm willing to pay $95. Let's see. Yeah, $95. If this was how much I put in? $1,600. If my rent was $1,600, I will now cash flow $406. And now, whoops, $406. This is now a 14.9% return. 14.9. And this was assuming a $95,000 purchase price. $6,600, 8.5%. So you can see what I've been doing here, right? One, if my purchase price went down, this would be a deal to get the 15% return. Or if I talk to someone like Stu and say, hey, how much do you think this property would really fetch in terms of rent? And he says, hey, it's probably closer to $1,600 now. Well, cool. Then I can offer 95 instead of 85, right? This is how you play around with scenarios to figure out at what point is this property a deal? Because for every property, there is a number or a set of terms that makes this a deal to meet your own criteria. So this is going to be very, very important. Now, I just went through and assumed that I'm going to stay conventional. Well, let's see how this might be a deal if this was a seller finance deal. So we call that creative finance. And in creative finance, usually we try to figure out whether or not there is an underlying loan in place that we can take over subject to. How I do this is I usually go to PropStream, and let me stop sharing the Excel, and I'm going to share the entire screen with all of you so you guys can follow along on this piece. Okay. Plug in the address, 1703 Sunderland. Let me put this in PropStream. And I'm going to show you guys on PropStream what that looks like. Boom. And what are we doing here? Once you load up the address, you can click on the details section. And then if there is an underlying loan, usually you would be able to see it in this section right here called the mortgage and transaction history. Now, there is no underlying loan because you see the last transaction right here. It says 10/26/2016. This was a cash deal. So some investor bought it, so they likely own it free and clear. And they probably renovated and now they're trying to flip it. Okay, cool. That is what it is. So I'm going to assume it was completely owned free and clear. Well, now, if my rent is still $1,472, what type of terms could I get to make this a deal at 15%? So I'm going to bring this back up to $149,900 because you're going to give the seller the price that they want if they can give you the terms that will make the deal work for you. So if they give them $149,000, the first thing I want to do is I want to play around with a down payment to lower my cash investment in this property. If I pay 10% and my interest rate is 8.5%, that's not a deal. What if I lower this to 2%? Oh, okay, now we're talking. All right, so I can pay up to 2.625. Yeah, there we go. So I can give this property owner a 10% down and a 2.625% interest rate because I'm still giving them a nearly $150,000 of purchase price. But now in this scenario, I'm cash flowing $319, and that is still a 15.1% cash and cash return. So let me highlight what's changed in this scenario, right? The seller is financing it, which means the seller acts as the bank for this transaction, not a normal lender, but a seller becomes the loan. And this is a great way to kind of add it up for the seller. If you go to the loan one section and you want to add up how much, assuming this is a 10-year balloon, so 120 months, how much interest does this person make over the first 10 years? He's going to make he or she is going to make $31,000 in interest. So I'm going to write $31,000 interest because why would a seller sell it to you on 2.625% interest rate? Because how the amortization table works is that most of your interest is really front loaded in your loan. And that's how a lot of folks make money, because when you're in a bank and you're lending out these 30-year mortgages, a lot of folks on average sell within like 7 to 10 years, or they upgrade their home. So they still want to make a majority of the interest before any of the principal gets paid down in this scenario. So that's how we get to $31,000 interest. So you can present that correctly to the seller and say, hey, you're actually getting not just $150, but you're getting extra $31,000 interest. So really you're making $181,000 when all this is said and done. Okay. That's one way you can go about it. All right. Well, what if I go lower on my down payment, but then the seller wants higher interest? So how do I make this work? Well, if I make this a 5% interest, then I make, nope, 3.5%, great. So if I get down to 5%, but they want more interest, 3.5% interest now, everything else is still nearly the same. But what's my cash flow? My cash flow now is 221, and my cash and cash return is still 14.9. Why is that still a deal, even though I'm only making $200 a month? It's because my cash and cash return is a lot higher because I gave a much lower down payment, right? And how much is my interest pay now? Now this seller is making $44,600 in interest. Cool. But what if the seller wants a really, really big down payment in order to take the deal? Well, I might be able to do that if it was a principal only payment. So I can go up to 25%. Let's see, 22.5. Yeah. I can give up to a 22.5% down payment if the seller was willing to take principal only payments, which means that there are no interest. There is no interest. 22.5% interest rate, and that's part of the max I can give the seller. This is a $538 cash flow a month, and that is a 14.7% cash and cash return. So hopefully you guys all saw how that worked. In every scenario, especially if this property is owned free and clear and you can know how to pitch a creative finance deal, then that is how you can determine whether or not there is a deal to be had. And you can kind of see right here, these are your main factors that cause the deal to become a deal. We started off by changing the purchase price. Then we said, hey, what if the rent was higher? Will we be able to get a deal? And then we found out that was a fully seller finance deal. So in all these scenarios, what made this a deal? Well, that allowed us to get to the 15% cash and cash return based on how you played around the numbers. Amazing. So hopefully that was helpful for everyone that is watching. I hope you guys are able to find this useful. And most importantly, you're able to copy exactly what I'm doing, put this on your own YouTube channel, and do the same thing. This is not a solicitation for any investments. I'm simply showing you guys what I'm doing on a daily basis to analyze deals. One of the hardest things that people go through whenever they are looking to invest out of state is looking for a team. You want people that are able to show up on time and be responsible and actually just do what they say they're going to do. And I've been able to fortunately bring on guests onto the Affordable Housing and Real Estate Investing podcast so that you all can feel a little bit less afraid, a little bit more comfortable. And honestly, if you continue to do this every single day for 365 days in a row, well, now all of a sudden, you're going to feel way more confident, and you can look back and tell yourself, hey, I know what I'm doing. I've at least analyzed for 18 minutes a day for a year, and that makes me better underwriting than 95%. Remember, that's at least a stat I've heard.